Here, just want to go over some of the aspects of early Homo sapien culture. And what I've done here is I've just looked over the website from the Australian Museum and read about some Homo sapiens. And I just kind of taken some of it and put it together here in a chart to help you better understand some of the aspects of culture that were talked about in the previous video. So, in terms of symbols, um, there was some jewelry found, and it's kind of progressed over the last 80,000 years or so. But and when I say jewelry, I don't mean modern day jewelry. I'm talking about like early Homo sapien culture. They had like shells and pieces of personal adornment or things that people would wear that seemed to be decorating themselves. So there might be like a shell with a hole in it that maybe somebody wore on a necklace. Language. There were cave paintings that may have they said they noticed repeated symbols over and over, so there may have been some language. When you see the same symbols over thousands of years, maybe those cave paintings were indicating some language. Values. It was hard to find anything that necessarily was a value. Same with norms. I just went on the idea that like wearing clothing is kind of a norm now, right? And there was clothing evidence about 36,000 years ago. They were able to find some evidence of some fibers and things. But there's a lot of stuff within that is hard to find evidence of because it doesn't last that long. So it depends on how it was preserved. Art. So there's artistic expression about 100,000 years ago, but then there's not much evidence again until this huge increase around 40,000 years ago. And that's where some of these cave paintings started to come around here. Music, about 32,000. So that 40,000 years ago seems to be that mark where like there's a shift in um, the artistic expression and the culture really seems to be building. So we have musical instruments that have been found dating back to at the oldest 32,000 years ago. We have burial evidence for religion, but I would skip down here to beliefs and customs. So there's burial evidence as far back as 80,000 years, but again, developed more in the last 40,000 years. What it explained was that they just have become more elaborate um, burial evidence or customs is what they might have seen, which may indicate some religion, along with the cave paintings and arts mentioned how they had these interesting like creatures and things that they had painted or that could have been, what they perceived as a god or something like that. But that's kind of tricky because it's hard to necessarily document. So I don't know that there's any, beginnings of modern day religion that we have evidence for. But that's kind of the whole idea of religion, right? There's usually not, evidence for this belief. Um, Government groups were generally about 20 to 100, 25 to 100 people until about 11,000 years ago when we discovered more about agriculture and were able to kind of settle down. So in this unit, we're really looking kind of before this 11,000 years ago to where there wasn't necessarily agriculture and we were mainly hunter gatherers. So there was not a lot of government. There was some social structure. So population growth about 40,000 years ago led to the social learning, which then allowed like that development of more culture. That's what they suspect is that population growth allowed that, which allowed for more of the art. We were able to find more evidence of this. Education, it did say they'd learned to make some stone tools. So obviously there was things that were handed down from like one person to the next. Um, and so like stone tools, and they did become more complex over time. There's evidence of that. But in terms of Homo sapien culture, like the early Homo sapiens, this is it. I mean, this seems pretty simple. However, this is much more complex than any of the other hominids that we've discovered so far.